engaging men is about embracing. And I'll tell you before I go into this, I got permission to say what I'm going to say to you tonight because this is a personal story. What engaging men is about is our Clinton Stanleys of the world, our Clinton Stanleys that live in communities that have made mistakes. I've heard some commentation about folk who've made mistakes. You never know who's watching you. My father-in-law, he's a preacher, and he said something to me years ago. If you ever want to hear God laugh, tell him what your plan is. I woke up April the 26th, and I do know my friend the mayor had a great deal to do with it. Got a call from Governor Rick Scott. I was told to meet him out at the airport. We had a conversation, and the rest is history. You never know who's watching you. Clinton Stanleys of the world. I met Clinton in 2016 when we were chairing a task force on violence here. I thought Mr. Clinton was a loudmouth. Mr. Clinton has been through some things. Mr. Clinton has had some trouble with the law. But Mr. Clinton is the guy, every time he sees me, he talks about how do we continue to work with these kids before they get to a point to make the same mistakes that he's made. I've had my eye on Mr. Stanley since 2016. He's talking and working with kids in the community so they don't make the same mistakes that he's made. Mr. Stanley has a hustle. His hustle is up at the Webb convenience store right in front of the Taylor's apartment. He has a barbecue stand. Free commercial for you too, Mr. Clinton. But here's a guy who, when I called him and I told him I want to get some information and I also want to get permission from you. And I apologize for disclosing this, but I told him because it's important that we reach down into the community and we always talking about redeeming, and we always talking about working with folk that's made mistakes. I said, man, I love to tell your story. And I heard some gargling sound, and I thought he was drinking a soda or something on the phone. Can anybody tell me what Mr. Stanley was doing? It made me pull over on the side of the road. Mr. Stanley's, there's Mr. Stanley's in Pine Hills, there's Mr. Stanley's in Ivy Lane, there's Mr. Stanley's all around that all they want is that chance and that opportunity. Those are the folk that we need to reach. When we talk about what's taking place in our communities, that we need to fix what's in our communities, we need to work with the Mr. Stanleys of the world. Mr. Stanley has demonstrated to me, he never knew I was watching him like I've been watching him, and the night is also putting more pressure on him because the expectation is higher now. But you got our support, Mr. Stanley. Stand up, Stanley. So that's the engaging men part of what we're talking about here tonight.